Welcome to the episode 3 of this devlog series, summarizing my progress through making a hexagonal factory game. In the last episode, we built a system to allow players to place and remove objects from the world. We also made sure that this was working in multiplayer. And in this episode, we add to that a harvesting mechanic with which the player can gather resources from the environment, such as wood from trees or metal from the ores in the world. And we will of course make sure that this works in multiplayer as well. Let's start with the visuals. In order to add some colors, I made a grass material that has dirt edges to distinguish the hex styles from one another. The ground material will be completely redone, but it already adds a bit of life. For the trees, I reused the one from my initial proof of concept, as I think it does the job for now. For the metal ores, while I like the crystals I made in the first demo, they are completely unrealistic compared to real-life ore veins. However, ore veins in real life are very boring, so I will have to do something a little more interesting. The first thing I tried was to make it look like metal veins, similar to something like Satisfactory. I couldn't make that one look good, but that's probably due to my limited modeling skills. It also feels too detailed for such a low-poly art style. My second option is more of a deposit form. I don't mind this one, but I think it's not as grandiose as the crystals. However, I really like the blend of the rocks material alongside the metal, so I decided to go back to the crystal form, but add some rubbles to the ground for a nicer integration with the floor. And just for fun, I decided to make a custom shader with terrain blending. This technique consists in blending the ground texture or dominant color at the bottom of the model to make it feel more embedded in the floor. I think that looks pretty good. I'm really happy with it. As an experiment, and also to practice a little bit with Blender, I made this little hexagonal crate. I'm not yet sure how I'll use it, or if I even will, but I think it looks nice. Now, let's do a little bit of logic. The block placement mechanic is at the core of every factory building game. So, I need that architecture to be quite thorough, as I will likely not be able to simply afford remaking such a foundational feature if I get it completely wrong. My architecture will be heavily inspired by Minecraft, as it is one of the most modded games out there. I trust that this is partly because their very modular code architecture allowed it. The idea is that the user will be holding on to items in their inventory. Item will be composed of things such as an icon to display in the inventory, but also data such as its name, description, and so on. Certain items, such as machines, will be placeable in the world. Those will be called block items, and they will have everything a normal item has, plus a reference to the prefab to spawn. Upon harvesting those blocks, the user will gather more items, thus completing the cycle and closing the first quote-unquote gameplay loop in my game. To add complexity to the options of what a block can produce when harvested or destroyed, the block will hold a reference to a loot table, which will provide what to give to the player when harvested. For things like ores or trees, I made a special type of block script called harvestable block. This will be for any kind of block that may produce an amount of item every time the user harvests them. I will need a harvest duration property, storing how long it takes to harvest a block. I also added a field storing how many times a block can be harvested before breaking. And last but not least, I need to know what to give the player upon harvesting the block, so let's add a reference to a loot table as mentioned earlier. I added an RPC to the block for a client to notify the server that they completed a harvesting cycle. The server then decides what to do with this information. Firstly, remove 1 from the remaining harvest count for everyone. Then, a check to destroy the block if it has reached its harvest limit, and destroy it if so. And finally, generate the loot to give to the player who harvested it. If you have experience doing network programming, you may have noticed an issue already. The timing of each harvest cycle is not server authoritative. This is obviously very prone to cheating, because anyone can mod the game and have a crazy harvest speed. However, as mentioned in previous videos, cheating is not really a concern for the scope of my game, so I leave it like this for now. To test all of that, I made a simple inventory display to visualize what's in the current inventory, as well as a progress bar to visualize the current harvest cycle. I will probably change the latter for some nice effects or particle systems later. So now we can harvest the block until it reaches its harvest limit and gets destroyed. Its produce will be generated from the loot table and placed in the user's inventory. This also nicely works in multiplayer. This is about halfway through the main gameplay loop I mentioned earlier, so overall I'm happy with the progress. Now I will talk a little bit about localization. At first, my game will only support English, maybe French and Spanish eventually, but I'm still unsure if I'll manage. But anyway, even if you plan to support only one language, using localized strings tools is absolutely worth it. It gathers all your user-facing strings into one place, making it extremely easy to reuse and edit your strings. This is also a great opportunity for me to learn about the fairly new Unity localization package, which I will be using for this project. Thank you so much for watching this episode. In the next one, we will complete this first gameplay loop by creating an inventory UI from which the user can select the item to place. If you'd like to give me feedback or ideas, you are very welcome to join the Discord server in the description. Hoping to see you again in the next episode.